realms of influence. And so I wanted to share just a little perspective. A few years ago, I wrote something called The Mark of the Lord. And I quoted William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army. And of course, he was in the late 1800s when he wrote this. It says, I consider that the chief dangers which confront the coming century will be religion without the Holy Ghost, Christianity without Christ, forgiveness without repentance, salvation without regeneration, politics without God, and heaven without hell. And it seems to me that though this was written well over 100 plus years ago, it was a prophetic statement to the seasons ahead that we're living in today in 2024. And I really believe, according to Zephaniah 1:12, when it says that the Lord would shine his light, it says, take lamps through Jerusalem and mark those who have been complacent or compromised. And I see that judgment always starts in the house of the Lord first. And we've seen the last couple of years, actually, we've seen it progressively, but at the end of last year, or 2022, I felt like the Lord was saying there was going to be an incredible spotlight of the Lord, spotlighting things that were done in darkness that would be exposed, but also spotlighting the things that he wanted to put focus on. And we've seen that. We've seen the spotlight, we've seen the exposures, and we've also seen implosions, so many implosions, not just in the things of this world, but the implosions in the house of the Lord that can be very disheartening. And that's another reason that's the shaking for us to get our focus back on the Lord. And that's really something I've been sensing strongly. Back in 2020, well, actually in 2019, everyone was, the big thing globally, we were a part of it as a ministry, was to focus on 2020 becoming the year of the Bible. And oh, how that was so prophetic, and being confronted in the world with the COVID virus and all the fallout from that, and the lawlessness that has been released since even then, the exponential lawlessness. And but yet again, the Lord was speaking ahead of time. He speaks to his people. This needs to be a time for the Bible. Get in the Word, because we know the Word works. And so I had actually wrote an article for 2020 before we went into COVID, and it was called The Word Works, and it was in cooperation with the year of the Bible. But we see again, it's getting back to God's Word, getting back to his nature, character, word, and spirit. And so I really believe that that's where we need to maintain, keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, the living Word, stay in his Word, stay grounded. We've seen a lot of people, even in the last 4 years, going through what many call deconstruction, trying to figure out their faith. And it's been very disheartening and sad to see people I've known and say they love the Lord and have served the Lord, and going through these doubts of their faith, and deconstructing their connection to the local church or the local body. And so it's a very disheartening time. That's why I really believe, even prophetically, the National Day of Prayer theme this year is lift up the Word. And so we are full circle. Year of the Bible, lift up the Word, and light up the world. So lift up the Word, light up the world. That's the theme for National Day of Prayer. Kathy Branzell, the president, and I were meeting a few weeks ago, and they really felt like if it were possible, even though there's things happening in my city, in our state, if there's any way I could be with them in Washington, D.C. for National Day of Prayer. So my wife and I have agreed to do that. We've got some wonderful things happening in our city, in our region, in Texas, with National Day of Prayer. But I really sense that in this particular situation, to be in D.C. And so the first night we get there on May 1st, I will be a part of a dinner at the Bible Museum. And then the next morning, they pick us up at 6:30 in the morning, and then they'll take us to the Capitol. And at the Capitol, we'll be having a 7 a.m. Gathering that morning, where some of us will be praying. I'll be praying 3 minutes into that theme as well. They'll be taping that in the Capitol, and then I believe it airs that night on all the television channels, the Christian television networks that night, I believe 8 p.m. Eastern time on National Day of Prayer. So it'll be live, and we'll be doing it in the Capitol, but also we'll be going forth that night when it's been edited to go out to the nations to pray for for America. And but after the live gathering in the morning, they really sensed that we were to have a gathering called the Capitol Lunch, and they've asked me to be the keynote speaker for that. So I'm very humbled by that. But as Kathy said, she really feels like when it comes to that theme, lifting up the word and lighting up the world, really felt that that was kind of really the DNA, the what Somebody Cares really represents. And so I'm taking that into prayerful consideration of how to share those 15 minutes, which sometimes the most powerful things we can say are in shorter versions, not in long version. And so I'm really praying that God will give me the exact words to speak in a very succinct way at the Capitol with all of these leaders that will be there. The next morning on May the 3rd, we've been asked to stay over, and some of us will meeting with the Israeli ambassador at the Israeli embassy. And then because I'll be staying for that, I won't make it back in time for a gathering in Rockwall, Texas. So I did talk to the organizer, Dolores, and they understand because my flight could not get from Washington, D.C. to Dallas and then get me to Rockwall in time. I'll still be flying to Dallas for other reasons as well, but also because I feel like I need to be on site for insight, so at least I can be on the ground interceding and agreeing with those that are gathering in Rockwall to pray for Texas and for our state, even though I won't be at the stadium itself. So I did agree to put together a little video greeting and just a prayer that they can use if they want at the gathering. And then, and also I'll be doing that for some other National Day of Prayer events that have invited me. I can't be there, but I will do some videos for various people. And then on May the 4th, Saturday, I am staying over in Dallas area to meet with two key pastors that are friends of mine. The pastor of Chris McCray, who's now the senior pastor at Sojourn Church in Plano, and his wife, along with my wife, and then also with Pastor Ryan Binkley and his wife, Ellie. The six of us will be meeting. Ryan is the pastor of Create Church, also a very successful national business executive, owns a company, he and his dad. And for those that remember that name, he also was one of the three people left that was running for president. He didn't have a big name, but he felt like the Lord had called him to get into the process to make sure that the message was being heard at the ground game, and it was. I've heard from a lot of people from across the different states that he went through that really liked him. Of course, they didn't feel like he could win. They really liked him, and they liked what he had to say, especially as a Christian pastor and successful business leader. So I really believe there was at least something was said, things were imbibed, and people heard what he had to say. So the voice was far greater than, let's say, the optics of what it means to go into a candidacy like that. And so we'll be meeting with them and kind of seeking the Lord about what is happening. They're great supporters and friends of the ministry. And then also, then he's asked me to stay over to preach 2 services at Create Church in Richardson at 9 and 11 something that morning on Sunday morning. Afterwards, we'll fly back to Houston. Speaking of that, I really listened to some really heartbreaking voice messages from a dear friend. She and her husband are part of our network of ministries. They have an incredible ministry to orphans as well. And her father was an elected official in Mexico. She lives and born and raised here in Houston, but her father was an elected official, very strong biblical Christian. And they were leaving a message to my wife and talked to my wife, and I listened to those messages. And just the dynamic of how this next elections in Mexico are so critical, like we would say here, but they're on the verge of becoming another Venezuela, Cuba, and already Many of the opponents that would tend to be more biblically conservative, other opponents, mayors that are good mayors and good political leaders in Mexico have been assassinated. Over 26 that we've heard of yesterday. And in fact, one community where they really loved the mayor, was not corrupt, was doing really good things, and was assassinated during a photo op for some people. And we're seeing that increase there. So the idea is to get rid of your opponents. Isn't that what socialism and communism does? And dictators, they get rid of their opponents. And sadly, we see so much of that similarity across the board in our own nation. And so with the southern border, with the fentanyl crisis, with the drug cartels that are now doing human trafficking, which doesn't get a lot of media attention. I've been on the border many, many times, as you know, throughout from Eagle Pass all the way up to other parts of Roma, down to McAllen, to Mission, up and down. And I've met with people on both sides of the border, prayer gatherings, as well as doing humanitarian things, as well as doing appreciation days for those who patrol the border. There's just a lot of lawlessness, and it's really it's sad to see what's happening on our border, because what's not being said in this rush of people coming through. I was talking to one of my Uber drivers in Florida who escaped from Venezuela. He actually worked with the government there, and so he had legitimate asylum. He worked with the government, but when he used to be a border patrol for Venezuela, they were told, it came down from the president, their dictator, they were going to start letting out people out of prison, let them come across the border, make their way to the United States. They didn't want to keep them as a problem, wanted to send their problems up here. And he said it was crazy. He said, as we were driving, you could tell he was so deeply broken by that, because he came here legitimately. He says, but I was there. I was at one time Border Patrol, and we were told to do that. And they were basically cleaning up, purging Venezuela of what they felt like they didn't want, and setting them across the border to come up towards America and the United States. And so we see this incredible dynamic of people taking advantage. We see what's happening on the streets of our universities today by people, many who are not even citizens, and those who are saying death to America, who are anti-Israel. And so we see just a lot of ignorance, and even the verbiage and the chanting, and just it's saddening to me. I could just see my father and my stepfather, who were military veterans for their whole lives, and believed in God, country, and family, family and country, and I can imagine how many other veterans are turning in their graves, so to speak, and heartbreaking it can be. And those who are still here that are probably heartbroken at what they've seen happen to our country. So I'm just saying all that to say, as Second Thessalonians says, is that we do have lawlessness. The lawless one is being unleashed, and we see lawlessness and anarchy has grown exponentially, but we really know where it comes from. And that's why we as believers cannot be distracted. We have to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And we also need to stay in the Word, to know the living Word, and so that His light would shine in us. In fact, I've been sensing a lot, and I've been sharing this a lot with leaders across the country, that I really feel like with all the divisiveness, and you've heard me share on that, what the precursor to what happened during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the scattering of the people, that we have some strong similarities today of divisions within the political as well as the religious circles. And we see families divided over all these things. And it was at that situation, when they were off balance, that Rome was able to come and desecrate the temple and destroy Jerusalem and scatter the people. And we're right at that point, I believe, if we're not careful. But the answer is not to be looking at each other as our enemy, but our answer is on our knees. Stay low, draw near to hear, and then move quickly when God speaks. And I really sense those are words that we've spoken of and written about over the years, but I look back now and realize those are actually prophetic words that God was giving, at least to us in our relationships, to encourage the body of Christ. Stay low, stay humble, draw near to hear, and to move quickly when God speaks. And how are we going to know how He speaks if we don't listen? I think it's a time of it's not just talking, but listening to God. and then realizing he has a purpose for all of us greater than what we're seeing. And so I'm getting back to some basics, even in Matthew 5:16, let your light so shine before men. Of course, that'll be one of my scriptures, but also when we see Jesus speaking to his disciples and he says, look up where from your own situation, your own 2 feet, your own circumstances, look up and see in the midst of all this, the fields are ripe and white unto harvest. This is our moment. We are in a Nineveh moment. We're in a harvest moment. This is our moment for the church to rise up and shine in the midst of the difficulties, Luke 21:13, but it shall be an occasion for your testimony. It turn out it's an occasion for your testimony. So I just want to give you kind of a precursor to that because I really feel like that's where we are. Then let me give you a few things that we're doing practically that you've been praying us through and being with us on. And thank you so much because we couldn't do it without you. It's always the multiplication of the fishes and the loaves. It just blows me away. And, even as I was in Ukraine, my wife and I, as you know, we were invited by bishops and rabbis and military chaplains back in October, during my birthday in October. We took the long trip, 13 hours of train rides to get to Kiev and listening to their hearts and the things that they've been through. And I'm not talking about the political side. I'm not talking about all the other stuff. I'm talking about believers that are there trying to be a light in the midst of what's going on. And so we were able to take, I believe, we've given out already 400 digital Bibles that can be operated with solar and with plugs, because one of the biggest needs that we were asked for was Bibles in Russia and in Ukraine, people wanting Bibles. But how the cost to take cases and cases of Bibles was huge. So we were able to work with Galcom. And Jody, our vice president, her father was the president of Galcom, still very actively involved. So we were able to take that technology and partner with them, and we were able to purchase 400 solar Bibles. And those solar Bibles are about the size of a cellular phone. And on that, we put the whole Bible on there in the Ukrainian language. So we've continued to have requests. They went like hotcakes. People love them. And so they've asked if we could get more. So we've just purchased some more. This time we're going to put, each one will have Russian language of the whole Bible and the Ukrainian language of the whole Bible on one little phone-looking thing that can be charged. And so we also have another man that was a military chaplain they've asked me if I would come to the war front for Ukraine and Russia and meet with some of the military, bring some encouragement. I said, absolutely, let me know, and we'll see if we can work it out. But they've been needing the Bibles as well, and he's been sending me messages privately on one of those secure message things, and said that they've led over 1,000 soldiers on the front line to the Lord through this crisis. So Luke 21:13. And just sending me messages how to pray for him and challenges they're going through, since he's living right there, and then he's got his family in Kiev. And then we have others that are working in the region as well. So let me just kind of go over a couple of things that you can be praying with us on right away. I do have a couple of pretty important prayer requests I have for you, not personally yet, but one is, would you continue to pray? One of the people that we've been asked to pray for, the Consul General of Israel, their offices had contacted us right after October 7th and asked if we could adopt one of the families. We pray for all the hostages, but one of the hostages' families. And so Alexandre Danzig is an elderly man who's still, they have not heard from. He's still a hostage as far as we know. So we actually had a Zoom call with one of his children, his son, Yuval, and had a great prayer time and conversation. He gave us the back end story of what happened and how they're praying and believing as well. I'm hoping to get to meet with the family when I'm in Israel at the end of May. And the Lord will. So be praying that there's no issues, that we can still catch our flights and that everything goes well as we gather in Israel. And I'll be making some visits to some of the kibbutzes and to the places that many were massacred during October 7th, and then also visiting on the border there of Gaza and Israel, as well as meeting with different family members and others to pray for the peace of Jerusalem as well. I was also visiting with some of our folks that live there. As you know, Justin and Kennedy Bolin, who used to be on our staff, who actually I did the preparedness peace, disaster preparation and response material that they're doing every Monday night for those that have signed up. Every Monday night from Israel, they're doing the preparedness piece for all those that signed up through Somebody Cares. But they used to be on staff with us, and they were the first Christians that were actually brought on staff with the Jewish agency in Israel. And so we worked through all the crisis there, getting their family out initially to be able to help get the word out and raise funds for bulletproof vests and other things that were here, but they went back to Israel. So we'll be meeting with them as well, also with Melanie and her husband, who Melanie came to the Lord through a tent revival that I did at a Baptist church at Sherwood Forest Baptist Church back in the 80s. She became part of our ministry, went on to volunteer at the Joseph Storehouse in Israel, and decided to stay, and ended up falling in love with someone who just got out of the IDF and who had a spiritual journey in the desert, and ended up finding the Lord Jesus. And Jesus found him and started writing Christian music. And so they actually live in a kibbutz that they helped establish in the desert of Israel. And some of the people in their kibbutz were also killed during the massacre. So I'll be meeting with them as well. They're still a part of our ministry, a family of ministries and individuals and missionaries that we feel like we need to continue to cover. So there's a lot of others that we'll be praying for as well. And real briefly, Jody, would you share a little bit what we did even financially into helping some folks in Israel after the massacre?
Yes. Hi, I'm Jody. We sent funds to the Shaloms, Melanie and her husband, because some of the kibbutzes that were closer to the Gaza border evacuated to their kibbutz, while people from some of the men from their kibbutz went to the border to rescue them. So we sent some funding to help provide food and shelter to some of the people who had to evacuate, as well as what they call lone soldiers. And lone soldiers are just, young men and women who, I guess they're not married, they're single, they're not living with their parents anymore, but they were called up quickly after October 7th, and many of them came to their stations without adequate clothing and food. I guess in the first, I'm not quite sure how it works, but I guess in the first few days they have to bring supplies to until their supply lines get set up. So the kibbutz, we sent some money to help with provisions for these lone soldiers as well. And we also heard through some of our connections, actually through the Bolins, about a young woman who had to evacuate, a young widow who had to evacuate with her 2 children, one of the kibbutzes, and she needed help finding a new place to stay that had a shelter. And so we also provided funding to help her get resettled into a new location, a safer location.
And so didn't we also, prior to that, had some funding that we helped towards a bomb shelter of some, or
Yes.
equipping a bomb shelter?
Yes, we did. We had also sent some funds. There are public bomb shelters all throughout Israel, and the Jewish agency tries to equip those public bomb shelters, particularly the larger ones, with what is needed for, the public that just have to get there quickly. So we helped provide the furnishings for one of those public bomb shelters. This was before October 7th happened, so we know it was well used.
And so we've been working with a lot of other ministries that work in and out there with even trauma things. And so in fact, this is, I know part of this is recorded, but there has been a partnership through our relationships in Israel as well. And because of this crisis, many of the those in the IDF are coming out and saying that they are believers in Christ, and they have a unique need to be helped as well. So there's grief and trauma training and equipping for them, as well as resources, not just for them, but for others that are in the IDF and those who are people that are going through grief and trauma. So part of the things, even preparedness piece with Justin and Canada, as well as other resources that are now being provided as a welcomed resource to help people going through these crises of stress. throughout that region. Speaking of that, getting back for a moment on prayer and worship, back in our own country, for those that know Lou Engle and I have been friends for decades, and I was a part of helping him with the first 7 calls. The largest one was the first one in Washington, D.C. He has really sensed this importance of calling 1,000,000 voices of Esther's and Mordecai's to come alongside. So they've been all these women's organizations and ministries that really captured it separately, but now coming together, that felt this was a God thing. And he's calling for Yom Kippur, October the 10th, this year, for 1,000,000 voices of Esther's and Mordecai's to come and pray and to seek God in humility and cry out for our nation, cry out for what's going on in the world, because he really feels like we're in that moment again, that Esther moment, where we need voices, these godly voices of Esther and the Mordecai's to come alongside to encourage and exhort, because we're in it. We're in that kind of moment. We're in the moment where we see the spirit of Haman unleashed around the world. And literally, I mean, from you look at places like even modern day Persia is Iran, and we see the spirit of the prince of the air. We see the spirit of Persia that's trying to stop the Lord and trying to destroy Israel and cause unrest throughout the Middle East and around the world. And so we see that what we need is God's intervention. We need his intervention more than ever. So it's like an Esther moment again. It's like, how do we come against the spirit of Haman? The church needs to rise up, just like with Nineveh, we had, like with Jonah. We cannot be a reluctant Jonah when God is speaking for us to rise up and realize this could be for such a time as this, even as Esther, as Mordecai said to Esther. So we're a part of that. In fact, Lou Engle has shared and visited with us in Houston, and really has asked me if I could get actively involved as kind of the apostolic covering. But I said, look, I can't do that like Che did. Che has a multifaceted capacity to do that as an individual when he did that for the first 7 calls. But I would be happy to be a part of a group of leaders who can come alongside and be kind of a, for lack of better terms, apostolic covering and help to help nurture some of this, so he could just seek the Lord, hear from God as an intercessor. And we're seeing a lot of traction and momentum for that. Another spiritual daughter, Laura Allred, who I officiated her wedding, she and her husband, they're part of Trinity Church near Dallas area. She is now going 100% as the director of mobilization, and while her husband continues worship and taking their position at the church. And so we see a lot of traction, and I think it's resonating in the hearts of many people. And so we need to be praying for that. It's called 1,000,000 Women. It's an Esther call on them all on Yom Kippur in October. Coming back a little bit to our compassion evangelism pieces that we need to really be praying about. One is, I would ask you to pray, as you know, with everything that I'm involved in and my wife is involved in, our ministry, we're stretched and wearing 20 different hats like many of you. But we also felt it was important not just to say that we support the godly law enforcement and first responders and military, but actually be involved, connected to it. And so I do a lot of the roll calls at particular stations for Houston Police Department, helping. In fact, I was on the phone with people from the Fort Bend Sheriff's Department wanting us to do something during their law enforcement a week, the week after the National Day of Prayer Week. Houston Police Department and so many others, Constable's Office. In fact, I just got a call from the Constable's Office here in Harris County asking if we can help them on something as well. But so during one of the roll calls, one of the officers came up to me and my wife and said, look, my dad was actually an orphan, half Japanese orphan, born in Japan. I know he could relate to your story. He's an amputee. I'm not sure how long he has left. He's in home hospice right now at my house and with my mother. And she said, is there any way you can come and just spend time with my father? And we said, absolutely. So we had a great time just spending time reminiscing about Japan, common cultural things, being between two cultures, and staying in contact with them. We had other police officers coming up all the time and appreciative of what we've done. I know Vicki Guillory. Vicki Guillory is on the call now. She has done a lot with HPD. Also, she's a Harris County Sheriff, volunteer chaplain, does ride-alongs. So there's a unique place when you cross that line of trust that opens up opportunity for people to share their deepest concerns and burdens. So it's given us a great opportunity to be a part of that as volunteer chaplains, and as I do a lot of consulting. I had the mayor of another city here in Texas ask if he's a longtime friend if I could come and actually speak and do something for their law enforcement in their city. And then there's another mayor, one of the youngest mayors ever elected in a city, is one of my spiritual sons, considers me a spiritual father or mentor. So he's inviting all the leaders from his whole county. They're meeting in his city and later this summer, and they asked me to be the keynote speaker. And they're going to give a copy of my Leadership Awakening to all these political leaders, mayors, council members, representatives, and so on throughout the county that they're from. And so these are the kinds of things that keep opening up. And those leadership things open up because of our willingness to serve at the grassroots level of just everyday people. We've never forgotten where we've come from. We want to make sure that we continue to be there and be available for people. The prayer calls that come in all day long, and emails that come in, and conversations, and it's just it's an overwhelming place. But I also know it's a great time right now for us to be available in the Lord. Our Houston outreaches, as we've had to downsize and lost some of our staff, in fact, I've been praying and I'm proactively looking on trying to enlarge our volunteer base again. Psalm 110, verse 2 and 3, an army of volunteers, because we don't have the funding to be able to do what we need to do. So I'm working and nurturing a lot of our relationship with Gen Edge and Next Gen leaders, and going to be proactively looking for enlarging our staff, but through an element of volunteerism. And like we've done in years past, I think at one time we had 26 or 27 staff, mostly full-time volunteers back in the day. And so we need to reignite that base. And so I'm going to start doing some regular revival preparation gatherings and think tanks and roundtables, just to engage people kind of up close and personal with me, to talk about revivals that I've personally been a part of, revivals of history, revivals that I've personally been a part of, as well as, hearing from them and what they're sensing, and empower them to move forward. We were in Nashville, the National Religious Broadcasters, and another spiritual son who works throughout Israel. In fact, he's the creator of an incredible technology and app, and he had a place called Theater 7000, where he takes hundreds and hundreds, and I think thousands now, he's helped train, of inner city kids, teaching them music and drama and technology. And they purchased a theater and fixed it up and do 3D things. And they creates plays all from the Bible, that he has written plays. But then he took it another step, and he's actually gone to every place in the Bible where you see the Bible stories, and he actually films on site where those Bible stories are from. And then he created a 3D situation where you could do it in your home and with your family, and the kids can dress up like Moses or Joshua or whomever, and Esther. And in the backdrop, you have the actual locations where in the Bible this is taking place. So many years ago, he saw me, I think it was in 2011, saw me on a national broadcast from Reliance Stadium when we did the response there. And he just said to his family, he goes, I need someone like him. I wish someone like him could be my spiritual father. And he said, I didn't even know your name because you never said your name. And so then all of a sudden, a few months later, I'm invited by a dear friend who and I served on the board of the Transformation documentaries, brought me to Philadelphia, walked into her office, and so she had invited a few people in the city there. I walked in and he just began to get teary-eyed. He goes, you're the guy that was on TV, right? From Reliance Stadium. And I said, yes. He goes, I know this sounds crazy, but I pray that you would be my spiritual father. And I said, well, Ben, I can't be your spiritual father because we don't know each other, but let's just be friends and journey together and see where it goes. Well, all these years later, I have no problem. I'm very proud of him to be a spiritual father in his life and over his family. And he considers me a spiritual father, mentor. Anyway, he's doing incredible things around the world. Has connected me with some amazing other people that he said, you really need to get with Doug. And so that keeps increasing too, this next gen that's keep asking people to connect and looking for that kind of spiritual mentoring. So while we're in Nashville and we're meeting with Byron Stinson, who is the Texas rancher who was asked to bring the 5 red heifers to Israel, we met. And so, but Ben said to me, he said, Doug, he goes, there's a lot of people like me out there, a lot of spiritual sons and daughters, people that need you to speak into our lives and give us our marching orders. I said, Ben, you and all the ones that I know that we're working with, you don't need my marching. You're doing it. I mean, you're doing things I couldn't even imagine doing. And he goes, no, what I mean is there's something about getting with you and just sensing that Father, that the presence of the Father, and then you affirming us and then giving us our new marching order to rekindle our marching orders. I said, okay. So literally, I just reached out to a few young leaders in in Houston area, and I put a little post out, and within a few minutes, I'm getting text messages and emails saying, this is God, we've got to do this. I wish I could be there. And so we're going to do a couple of different ones in Houston coming up in May and then in June. And already I've got a list of about 30 or 40 of these next gen and Gen Edge leaders that saying, I want to be a part. And so we're going to be doing something here, and I'm looking for a location and just the scenario and having to set up more of a round tables rather than, a theater style, because I want it to be where we get to hear from each other before I begin to speak into those marching orders. And so those are the kinds of things we're having involvement in right now. It's just some of it's not even because we're trying to organize, just because it's happening organically. The other is my wife stepped in to take on our Somebody Cares Houston outreaches. And just briefly, because she actually goes there, she's learned how to do the forklift. She goes to the warehouse that we get to work with, and she's unloading with the forklift. And I'm thinking, go girl, go. And so she's been asked to speak at some things even recently with one of our partners, Lakewood Church, at one of their major distribution sites, and asked her to share about what we're doing and about how others can get involved as well. But so she has been just in recently, because of all that she's doing, has helped over 20 different churches and ministries with resources, from Kingdom Care, Orphan Care, to even sending hundreds of brand new bicycles to Cuba, to Mexico, to other places. And now she just loaded up another container with bicycles and diapers and other resources that are going to our partner in Botswana called Love Botswana Outreaches, which I'm on the founding board and still on the board. So she's just on top of it. Diapers and bicycles just being sent to Love Botswana. We just sent more bikes to Mexico, and many pastors are using them for transportation and putting little buggies or little baskets on there to take Bibles and resources out to people in the rural areas to pray for them and give them Bibles. And she's bringing encouragement. And so we're helping people on the border. We did a major event last year with Border Patrol, law enforcement, mayors, and city councils. And in fact, I was just down in just a few weeks ago, back down in Eagle Pass, which you've seen on the news, people just flooding across there. So we were down there meeting with people from the governor's office, the county judge, the mayor, the police chief, meeting with all the key leaders there, as well as all the first responders and law enforcement leaders, and just bringing encouragement. They wanted copies in fact, the National Guard that were the Texas National Guard, they wanted copies of our devotions that we've been giving away called Behind the Badge and Bulletproof Marriage, and many of them wanted my book, Leadership Awakening, feel like it's a timely message for them. So now we're working on a time that now that all the media attention's off of it for temporarily, but the crisis is still there, And a lot of even great Christian organizations have been there doing revivals and crusades, and Samaritan's Purse and Franklin Graham and many other friends. But now that all that's over, we want to come back in and do a day and a time to show long-term appreciation for those who are working in a very difficult situation. The county judge said to me when I was visiting and said, look, I used to not be for securing the border from his political persuasion. He goes, but now I'm glad that the governor of Texas is finally stepping in, because look, just in our city, in this city here, there's we only have 26 or 27,000 people. Just in the last few days, we had well over that come across the border. We don't have the infrastructure to handle it. And so then you count that to the county and just all the crossing over points. And he said the fentanyl, the drug issues, the crime, he goes, we're just overwhelmed. And so in that, we want to be there to help hold their arms up and come and show some appreciation. So we're going to need to increase our budget to be able to get more of those, our leadership awakening, as well as our devotionals that we are able to get through a publisher at cost, just above cost, so we can get them into these areas and all these law enforcement places that are asking us to come help. I just don't know how to say no when it comes to the need is now, the time is now. It's a time such as this. So we've got to believe for the increase of capacity. And that's not always through money, it's through resources to help us, and it's through people. And so then at the same time, Jody, if you can give a quick update what's happening in Denver, Baltimore, and any other areas outside of Houston.
Yeah, of course, we have chapters and centers all over the country. And I was just talking with our Denver chapter leader the other day, and he was telling me that tomorrow, Friday, the 26th, they're having an evangelism outreach with a young man from Houston, Brian Trejo, and they're going to have hip hop music and giveaways and ministry. And he said last year they had healings and salvations that this same young man came. So they're asking for prayer for that as well. And they continue to offer lunch for a high school next door, students from a high school who have lunch release. They have about 40 students that come every day, pretty regularly. And they're able to really develop relationships with them and share Christ with them. So it's making an impact on those young people's lives. It's a rough part of Denver. So, and they just received a state grant to make both of their buildings solar powered. And the grant allows them to hire students from the high school and teach them how to install the solar panels and give them marketable skills. So they're going to have the opportunity to work alongside these young people all summer. They're going to be, getting solar, which will decrease their cost and also really sow into these young people's lives. So we're amazed at what God is doing there. In Baltimore,
on that one note of Denver, is for those that don't know, Pastor Michael Walker, his grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi, and here he has this multi-ethnic church, multi-economic church, took over an old dilapidated synagogue, refixed it up like a historic site. They have their own Wailing Wall inside the church when you walk in, and then at the same time they have a TV monitor showing the actual 24/7, the actual Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. And so it's an amazing eclectic gathering of people from all different generations, races, backgrounds, nationalities. And here's this the grandson of an Orthodox rabbi that God is using in such major ways in that city and beyond.
Mm-hmm. In Baltimore, of course, that's where the Francis Key Bridge collapse occurred. And our chapter there has a very strong network of ministries and churches. They came alongside law enforcement. Of course, they couldn't do much with the actual recovery, but they came alongside law enforcement to add snacks, to give them snacks and water, and offer chaplaincy services for that very difficult time. And they're
now,
also
on top of that, because the equity, our director of Somebody Cares Greater Baltimore was actually hired by the Baltimore Police Department and the city. They've trained over 200 volunteer chaplains to walk the beat, to do ride-alongs, to do outreaches. So they have a pool to draw from because they personally trained over 200 volunteer chaplains there.
Yeah, and through all of those relationships, they have identified some areas in the city that are really food deserts. Grocery stores have shut down. People have a hard time finding food close by that's accessible. So they have all come together to start a distribution center, and they're all working together on it. They're bringing in. They have a lot of fresh produce and that they're accessing, and then they're distributing it into these communities that really have not many options for where to get food. And it's a great opportunity once again to share Jesus as they're distributing the food. A huge undertaking. They're in the early stages of it, so continue to pray for them. They're also starting a kind of a thrift store to help fund some of this ongoing ministry. So that is in process as well. And they have great favor with a lot of businesses in the community. So just pray for them for wisdom, for direction as they continue that. Our Southeast Texas, Jasper Newton County, within the past year, the director unexpectedly passed away. But he had done such a wonderful job at raising up volunteers and making relationships with other churches in the area that the chapter has continued on. And when the big storm came through week and a half ago, Southeast Texas, a lot of those areas flooded again. A lot of the same areas that had flooded during, after Harvey, flooded again. And then they, as they opened the dam at Sabine River, and more water flooded in some of those low-lying areas. So our chapter there has stepped right in once again, and we've been involved in helping them with flood relief. We sent in a truck last week. We sent in a truckload of cleaning supplies and bleach and water, sent in some gift cards to help with the urgent unmet needs of families. Socks, which they were asking for. Nobody had dry socks. So we're sending our actual chapter in San Antonio sent them some socks. And we were able to provide a fairly substantial grant to them for home repairs, which they are taking applications now for families that need help. The Southern Baptists are there working alongside them. Southern Baptist volunteers doing muck outs, and they're taking applications for actual repairs, home repairs. So they told us the story of an 87-year-old woman who had 8 feet of water in her home, and she just didn't know what she was going to do. So they came alongside her. The volunteers mucked out her home, put new drywall in. Her water well had been submerged, and so it was the pump had been damaged. So they're able to replace her pump, and she just said, don't know what I would have done. Those are the kind of stories, that come. We talk about all the things that we do, but it's the individuals that are touched.
Yeah.
That
And Jody, even on that, because we're speaking to our friends here, that
yeah.
it doesn't seem like a lot on the larger entities or organizations, but we are like that tortoise. We're constantly there. We're there in the aftermath. We're still in a lot of disasters, even now from Hurricane Ian and other places. We're still working in East Texas and other places and throughout other parts of the country. And so we were able to, by the grace of God, even though we're totally stretched, that we were able to send so far $18,000 to help with some of those families. That's on top of the gift cards that we were able to send,
And bringing in a truckload of supplies. Yeah.
And the supplies. So that's just one location. And we're sending more funds and money too as we can. So these are the kinds of things that, it's the multiplication of fishes and the loaves. And all this, aside from the fact that we still have our own major foundational budgets that we have to come up with just to maintain the handful of people we have on staff now, and all the facilitation of what we're doing. I've for the years been my own personal executive assistant, because we haven't been able to bring on an executive assistant to help me because of all that we're involved in. So I'm doing all my own scheduling, my own flights, my own appointments, all those kinds of things, which is fine. But it adds to the taking away the hours in the day that we don't have, but we're not complaining. We're blessed and thanking God for the privilege of being a part of what He's doing. So if you want to take that on, Jody, the next step.
Yeah, we also have partners in the Beaumont area who we also were able to equip with gift cards to help the some of the families that were affected by the tornadoes that went through Port Arthur in that same storm system. And then one of our board members, longtime board member, and is starting a chapter in the High Plains area of Texas, and he has been responding, and his fledgling chapter responding to the Texas wildfires. We were also able to provide him some of the gift cards as well to help with families that needed, to relocate to temporary places to stay and other
Some communities lost their
Yeah.
volunteer fire departments lost everything. I mean, in the fires. I mean, that's how devastating it is in the panhandle of Texas.
Yeah, so we are stretched thin. We do what we can. We do what the Lord provides. We know that we can't do everything, but when we all work together, we can do a whole lot more than we could alone separately. So we do have a lot of opportunities, and if God is calling you to partner with us to meet some of those opportunities, we would love that. It needs to be the Lord prompting. But there are great opportunities ahead. Doug mentioned his trip to Israel that's coming up. That's a great need. And we also have other things. Doug expressed a need for an assistant, and we have some other things. So God's doing amazing things. We see Him working at all the time. But we do invite you to consider whether God's asking you to continue at a new level, or in prayer. Even introducing people who aren't familiar with the ministry to what God's doing through us would also be welcome.
We have been much like just George Mueller in the last 43 years. Just pray, trust God, and share with a few friends. Give updates like this. But thanks to a couple of other friends, they really felt like they wanted to give to the ministry, but they also wanted to help us to get some things done called like a case for support. And then they want to start bringing people together to introduce them to what we're doing, their relational equities, because I'm just not a cold call person. I'm not going to knock on doors and grovel. There's too much to do for the kingdom. And He's always been faithful. He's always been faithful to us. So I want to make sure that we honor that. But at the same time, if people want to invite friends that they have that might want to know about the ministry, then we're happy to schedule something for a dessert or a coffee or a gathering. And so we have some people doing that as well. And our case for support should be pretty much done soon. We've been working through it for months, but it's never going to be fully satisfactory for us because there's so much dynamic we're involved in, and it's hard when you only have a handful of people working on it. But one thing that came up even yesterday, was a good friend of ours. In fact, I'm going to be helping to officiate the anniversary of she and her husband being the pastors of Latter-day Deliverance Revival Church, Kim Kasi McKee. I officiated their wedding years ago when her father was still alive, the founding pastor of that historic church in the Fifth Ward of Houston. And so they've asked me, since I was part of their wedding, part of their history, and also part of officiating their wedding, then they also, and officiating when they became pastors there 5 years ago, I'll be part of their celebration this Sunday. But Kim also is the community outreach director of partnerships for KSBJ Radio and Hope Radio Network. So she had me interviewed yesterday for 30 minutes, and they're going to air it this Saturday. So that'll have a wide range of listenership, and hopefully people will hear and say, "Oh, that's right." I had a police officer, 6'10" police officer, come up to me and say, "I used to listen to you on the radio every day when you were on KSBJ Radio in the 80s. And then you did a 15-minute radio program and a 90-second vignette." And so I'm thinking, wow, and I'm looking up at 6'10", towering me. But we get that kind of response when people, and then when they hear it on the radio, they go, "That's right." So, that people remember to pray for us, because we might be small potato, as one Muslim president said. We might be small potato, but you have much equity. when you've done so much in that little bit that you have. And so, that's true. God's been good and faithful to us, because it's all glory to him that we've been able to take the fishes and loaves and give thanks and watch them multiply. Any final thoughts, Joe?